Imagine this. You're breathing right now, your heartbeat depends on oxygen. But have you ever wondered who's really producing it for you? The trees outside, the algae in the ocean, even a single microscopic plant cell, all are running the most extraordinary chemical factory on earth, silently every second. Yes, photosynthesis it is. In this chapter, we'll cover how plants perform this miracle and how light is actually trapped, how the energy splits water, how carbon dioxide becomes sugar. From chloroplast to Calvin cycle, every step tells a single story of energy transformation, of evolution, and of survival. By the end of this session, you won't just learn photosynthesis, you'll actually see life through it. So, to this single process that powers every life form you can think of, it captures energy from the sunlight, something completely useless to most organisms, and converts it into food, fuel, and oxygen. Without photosynthesis, there would be no animals, no plants, no us. It's not just a chapter, it's the reason Earth is alive while other planets remain barren. So, with this, all of you, this is Dipali Manchanda, your Surajmukhi, and I'm here to welcome all of you in this session where we are going to study photosynthesis in higher plants. Yes, this is going to be the part one of the same session, and we're going to go thorough, go deep into the concepts, and we'll understand each and everything relevant for the chapter. And the chapter is going to yield you at least 3 4 questions in the NEET exam and is equally one of the most conceptual chapter of your class 11th. And we know that plant physiology is something which has all the concepts that would take you longer. So if you don't want to lose those 3 to 4 questions, or I would say at least 15 to 16 marks in your NEET exam, so don't miss this session because it's really, really important. It's not an optional one, and so that you get all the updates about the sessions happening, do subscribe to the channel and right now press the bell icon so that you get each and every notification about each and every session happening here, because yes, we would be coming here to help you out with it. I've already described that what is photosynthesis and how is it important to us. Now we'll deep dive into the exact chapter and start our learning straight away. So all of you, we're going to start off with our chapter, which is photosynthesis in higher plants. I am directly moving to the contents of the chapter basically. We're going to do introduction and experiments in this class, and we're going to see light reaction, which is one of the first steps which happen in the process of photosynthesis, because the further second half of the chapter would be there in the form of the next class. So directly moving forward to our first topic for today, which is introduction to photosynthesis. I'll be here telling you what is photosynthesis diagrammatically and equation wise also. So listen to me very closely, very carefully. There's a plant here. We're watering the plant in the soil. Now, what is that water doing? That water is actually helping the plant to fix the carbon dioxide from the nature, to fix the carbon dioxide from the environment, as well as trap the energy of sunlight. So, the trapped energy of sunlight in the presence of carbon dioxide, which is being fixed using water, helps the plant to make its food, which is formed in the glucose. Right? When I say glucose, it's the simplest sugar. So the plant is making food for itself, and along with it, oxygen is released in the form of byproduct, which we humans are taking in. So yes, the plant is making the food for itself, and it has also got some extra to offer to us. Hence, we are dependent on the autotrophs or the plants, and they are the major producers because they are doing this process photosynthesis. So I hope this is clear. Depicting the same in the form of an equation, what would I say here? I would say that 6 molecules of carbon dioxide are getting fixed using 12 molecules of water To form one molecule of glucose, which is C6H12O6, 6 water molecules are released and 6 oxygen are evolved. Now, what could be the question that could come up? That if you see 6 carbon dioxide are fixed using 12 water molecules, which give me a specific ratio that the fixation of one molecule of CO2 would be occur by 2 molecule of water. So this ratio is important, 6:12 or 1:2. That to fix X amount of CO2, 2X amount of water would be required. Since glucose has 6 carbons, we need to fix 6 carbon dioxide using 12 water. 6 oxygen are released as a byproduct. Now it is the sun's energy which is trapped. To trap the sun's energy, we need a specific pigment which is known as chlorophyll. There are different pigments that absorb the sun's energy, but the maximum energy of sun is being trapped by this green pigment, which is chlorophyll. And then we are moving forward to the experiments related to photosynthesis. Now, which experiments, how we are doing it, what is it leading me to? We've just seen this equation of photosynthesis. How did we reach to this equation? Why carbon dioxide? Why is water required? What is formed? Is oxygen released? Can the process happen in absence of sunlight or even in the absence of chlorophyll? So we've come to this final equation by actually doing, scientists doing these experiments in the past, which led to us coming to this final equation of photosynthesis. So yes, in the coming up session, I am moving to these experiments only. Starting off with the very first experiment, listen to me closely, going to tell you each and everything in detail which is required here. Now, this experiment that you see here, this experiment is known as variegated leaf experiment. What is it known as, all of you? I am calling it as variegated leaf experiment. What is a variegated leaf? Everyone, when I am talking about a variegated leaf experiment or variegated leaf, this is the example of a variegated leaves, which is in the form of a mosaic. It has some portions on the leaf where this chlorophyll is absent and the one where chlorophyll is present. So the green portions are the one where chlorophyll is present. The white portions are the one where the chlorophyll is absent. Now I know, how will I know that chlorophyll is essential for photosynthesis? The product of photosynthesis is glucose. Glucose is stored in the form of starch. Now what can I do is a starch test. In the primary classes, we have learned that starch test can be done using iodine. It is this iodine which will turn the starch blue-black in color. We did it in laboratory, put a drop of iodine over potato and it all gets bleeding blue in color. So similarly, if I put some drops of iodine over these leaves, only those portions will turn blue-black, which are forming starch. On putting iodine, on doing the starch test, what did I see? These portions where there was green color is the only portion which is testing positive for starch. Rest, the other portion will take the color of the iodine, right? If you ask what color will it take? It will just take the color of the dye, which is iodine, which is slightly brownish in shade, but the portion where starch is present, it is turning blue-black. This experiment tells me that what is essential for photosynthesis? Chlorophyll pigment is essential for photosynthesis. It's green in color, it is shown here. So variegated leaf experiment, what did I do here? I did this experiment using a pigment which is iodine. Everyone, iodine was used to do the starch test, and I concluded that what is essential for photosynthesis? Which component of the equation is being depicted here to be very essential? Chlorophyll is essential for photosynthesis. Now I am moving to the next experiment. On the name of the scientist, this experiment is known as Mohl's half-leaf experiment. Why half-leaf? Because here half of the leaf, the lower part of the leaf is present in a beaker. The beaker has caustic potash in it. You call it as caustic potash, you call it as potassium hydroxide, or you call it as KOH. All of you, we are using KOH in this experiment, potassium hydroxide. And this KOH, what is the function of it? It basically absorbs carbon dioxide which is present in the environment. So I saw that this lower half of my leaf was dipped in KOH and the upper half is in environment freely. And after that, what did I do? The next step was again to see if photosynthesis is happening, in which part, how it is happening. We'll do a starch test. How? Again by using iodine. Now I have this leaf which I have taken out of the beaker. This is the lower half of it, all of you. Suppose I am calling the lower half as this lower half as B and this upper half as A. You saw that this upper half was the one which is in contact with the environment. It is the B part. If I write it here for you, all of you, it is the B or the lower part which was dipped in KOH. Now KOH does what? All my dear kids, it is my KOH which will absorb the carbon dioxide. Now if KOH is absorbing the carbon dioxide, can there be photosynthesis? No, there will be no photosynthesis. There will be no photosynthesis in the lower part because carbon dioxide is not there. If no photosynthesis is there, will starch be present there? No, starch will be absent there, and hence it is the B portion which tested negative for starch. It is not showing blue-black color, but the upper portion shows formation of starch and it is blue-black in color. So this Mohill's half-leaf experiment told me what? That what is essential for photosynthesis? This experiment told me that it is CO2 which is an essential component in the process of photosynthesis. Okay, all of you, so this is my second experiment. Moving to the third experiment further on, this is Joseph Priestley's experiment. It's also known as the bell jar experiment. You must be looking at bell-shaped jars. That's a glass jar, that's a bell-shaped special jar. So this experiment is also known as bell jar experiment. Joseph Priestley used a specific plant here, which is known as the mint plant. The mint plant is used here. And let me tell you, what did he do? This is Mr. Priestley here, very smart, very handsome. And all of you, let us see the first setup. Now, in the bell jar, they've kept two entities here. One is a mice and the other is a candle. Now, the mice needs oxygen to breathe. The candle to show combustion needs oxygen. For a little while, the mice was alive, the candle was burning, but after a little point, after a little time and space, the mice died and the candle blew off. We know that combustion required oxygen. In the movies also, you must have seen that when somebody got fire in the Bollywood movies, even if it is March, April, June, they would bring a blanket from somewhere and cover that person to extinguish that fire. It means that cutting oxygen can extinguish fire. So this got blown off because there was no oxygen. In the next set of experiment, what did they do? The same setup, but with the mint plant. Now, what is this mint plant doing? This mint plant is taking in the carbon dioxide, which maybe the mice is releasing, and during combustion, carbon dioxide is produced. So the mint plant is taking in the carbon dioxide, and it is releasing the oxygen also. So it is kind of restoring that environment. It is kind of restoring that dirty air which was present inside. As a result, I saw that the candle went on for longer. The mice was live for a little more time as compared to setup number 1, which showed me that yes, in the process of photosynthesis, there is oxygen which is released. So during these set of experiments which were done somewhat in 1770s, later on after these experiments, it was Joseph Priestley, bacho, it was Joseph Priestley who basically discovered oxygen, right? Who basically discovered oxygen. The experiments were done in 1770s. Bell jar experiment on mint plant. So the plant basically restores the air that the mice and the candle pollutes. Next experiment is Jan Ingenhousz experiment. I know a lot of names, but I'll tell you a tactic, a trick to remember that. What is it talking about? What is it talking about? Which component of the equation of photosynthesis? Now you can see two glass jars here in which water is filled, which directly tells me one thing, that the plants that I'm using here, they are some kind of aquatic plants. They're some kind of aquatic plants. Why aquatic plants? Because I can see photosynthesis happening or not by one starch test. We've done a number of experiments which have taught you about starch test. But now, what other thing can be an indication that photosynthesis is occurring? Release of oxygen. We've already seen in Priestley's experiment, who discovered oxygen, that oxygen is released during the process of photosynthesis. Now, if a terrestrial plant is doing photosynthesis, I cannot see the bubbles. I cannot see the oxygen coming out of the plant. But if that plant is there in water, the oxygen would be seen in the form of bubbles. Is the reason Jan Ingenhousz chose an aquatic plant and has put the setup, in one case in a little darker condition where there is very less ambient light, and in a well lighted condition. So suppose this is the one where they have put the plant in dark condition, and here they have put it in completely light condition. What was seen as a result of it? They saw no oxygen bubbles here. They saw no oxygen bubbles here. While in case it was put in light, they saw O2 bubbles. They saw what, everyone? They saw oxygen bubbles, which directly showed me that what is actively happening here, the process of photosynthesis is actively happening here. Absolutely right. So what is essential for photosynthesis? Light is essential for photosynthesis. With this experiment, I understood that what is essential for photosynthesis? Light is essential for photosynthesis. Ma'am, how do we learn it? I know that when I hear the word Ingenhousz, there's a train engine which is formed in my brain because I love trains. And I also know, we also know that it is the engine of the trains which drive them through, which drives the whole train through it. So if I talk the same related to photosynthesis, who drives the process of photosynthesis? It is sunlight. It is sunlight which drives the process of photosynthesis. So Jan Ingenhousz told the role of sunlight in the process of photosynthesis, all of you. Moving to the next experiment, all of you. Here I am talking about a scientist who is Julius von Sachs. Just give me a minute here, all of you. So yes, all of you, we were talking about Julius von Sachs. He's the scientist who proved at that point of time that it is the green parts of the plant where glucose is formed, and the glucose is also stored in the form of starch. So he just gave some statements, no such experiment that we have to do here. So what did he say? That glucose is made in green plant parts. It is made in what plant parts? Basically, the one which are green in color, and the extra glucose which is there, it is stored in the form of starch, number 2. And when I talk about the pigment which is helping in photosynthesis, it is stored in a special kind of body. At that point of time, chloroplast was not known, but later on it was updated that this pigment was stored in a special body that we call as What, all of you? That we call as chloroplasts. That we call as what, all of you? That we call as chloroplasts. So this was what was given by Julius von Sachs. Moving ahead, a very nice experiment. This is the second last one. It was given by a scientist who's known as T.W. Angelman. One of the experiment that I love. It is such a beautiful experiment. So what did Angelman do? First of all, he worked on a plant which is known as Cladophora. You can see that it looks like an algae. You can see that it's an algae. So he worked on a plant whose name is Cladophora. I'm underlining it. It's a scientific name, who worked on Cladophora. If I make a easy representation for you, suppose this is prism, all of you. This is prism. This is my sun. The sunlight falls on the prism, the white light. The prism splits the white light. The prism splits the white light into its component V, I, B, G, Y, O, R. So we got all the components. V, I, B, G, Y, O, R. These are the components, Vibgyor. Now it is somewhere here that they have placed this Cladophora or this algae. Suppose this is my plant. And now they look at the rate of photosynthesis using some aerobic bacteria. So there are some aerobic bacteria which will grow where oxygen is released. It's all in water, so you can see the oxygen bubbles, and if not, there are bacteria getting accumulated at the places where oxygen is released. So they observed that bacteria accumulated in all the regions of V, I, B, G, Y, O, R. Bacteria accumulated everywhere, but they spotted some extra growth of bacteria in the violet region, right? And specifically in the red region. Somewhere here, they show some extra growth. Sorry, not in the violet region, but it actually was, let me erase it, in the blue region. Sorry, everyone. What did they saw? That there were bacteria all the way, but more bacteria accumulated in the blue and the red region of the spectra. So this is a very, very clever experiment. The sunlight being split into the spectrum of Vibgyor, falling over the Cladophora and the plant, where there are aerobic bacteria which are used to see the rate of photosynthesis, oxygen evolving everywhere, but maximum oxygen evolved in the blue and the red region. So it's the wavelength of light represented by the blue and the red region which shows maximum photosynthesis. Conclusion of the experiment. Red and blue wavelength of light. Red and blue wavelength of light shows what? It shows maximum photosynthesis, all of you. It shows what? It shows maximum photosynthesis. Light, prism, getting split into components. In the blue and the red region, maximum amount of aerobic bacteria accumulating. That's the ultimate experiment out of all. I love it, all of you. The last experiment was given by Cornelius von Neal. Cornelius von Neal, all of you, he worked on purple-green sulfur bacteria, and he is the one which gave a depiction. I'll tell you, this is the general equation of photosynthesis, right? Carbon dioxide plus water gives me glucose and oxygen. Now everyone was confused as to, is this oxygen? But this oxygen which is here, is it coming from water or this oxygen is coming from carbon dioxide? So it is Cornelius von Neal whose experiments told us that this oxygen which is evolved during the process of photosynthesis, it comes from water and not carbon dioxide. How? So when H2S instead is the hydrogen donor for purple and green sulfur bacteria. The oxidation product is sulfur. What is it saying? It's saying that if I am doing a similar photosynthetic reaction for the purple green sulfur bacteria, so carbon dioxide is definitely fixed. Instead of water here, they took H2S because they're sulfur bacteria, and in the outcome, they saw that along with glucose, instead of getting oxygen here, we got S2. We got S2. Now, since I'm getting S2 here, and I can see H2S here, I can see CO2 here. If you compare these equations, these two equations, it directly tells me that the oxygen which is released here comes from water, because the S2 which is released here is coming from H2S. There's one more thing that you should see, that it is this carbon dioxide which is undergoing reduction, and this water is helping in what? Oxidation. So instead of the hydrogen donor, we are using what? Instead of water, we are using H2S. The oxidation product is not oxygen here. The oxidation product is a sulfur or sulfate depending on the organism, and it is not oxygen. Hence, he inferred that the oxygen evolved in the green plant comes from water and not from CO2. Very important and smart inference. Very important and smart inference. With this, all of you, we have done all the experiments which were related to the process of photosynthesis, whether it was the general variegated leaf experiment, whether it was Mohl's half-leaf experiment, Joseph Priestley's bell jar experiment, Ingenhouse's experiment which talked about the role of sunlight, Angelman's experiment which talked about the red and the blue wavelengths showing maximum photosynthesis, talking about Sachs who told about the glucose being stored as starch, or whether it is Cornelius von Neal who said that the oxygen evolved during the process of photosynthesis comes from water and not CO2. So you should have a bird's eye view of all these experiments in your mind, just like I told you, because each and everything is important when it comes to NEET, when it comes to our board exams. And moving with the next topic, we've seen introduction, we've seen the experiments here. Now we're moving to the pigment system. What are we moving to, all of you? We are moving to the pigment system now. Before moving to the pigment system, we are looking at the place where the photosynthesis is occurring. Looking at the place where photosynthesis is occurring, two things that I want to tell you, that photosynthesis occurs in green parts of the plant, whether it is the leaf or whether it is the young stem. The young stem is also green in color. When it turns old, it gets woody. But before that, it is green only. Before that, it is what? It is green only, right? So it's the green stem also which would do photosynthesis, leaf also. Though we know that leaves have a special cell which are known as the mesophyll cells. The leaves have special cells which we call as mesophyll cells. Mesophyll cells have small chloroplasts in them. We've done cells, so we know that the organelle is chloroplast, which is storing chlorophyll in it. We've done it in the cell chapter, but for the sake of it, we're again going through the structure of the main organelle that we're going to deal with in photosynthesis. Everyone, this is chloroplast, one of the type of plastid presence in plant. It is a double membraned organelle which is also semi-conservative. Which is semi-autonomous, not conservative, which is semi-autonomous. When we say a semi-autonomous organelle, it means that this organelle has got its own DNA. This organelle has got its own ribosomes. So other than the outer and the inner membrane, you will find ribosomes here. You will also find that it has got its own DNA. The other important labeling that we have here is the starch granule. Why? Because the extra glucose which is formed here, it is going to be stored in the form of starch. There are some lipid droplets also which are present here. Now the other 2-3 labelings, what are they? I know that there are these coin-like structures, this single sac-like structure which is present here. This single sac is known as thylakoid. Suppose I am drawing it for you here. Everyone, this single sac-like structure, what is it? This single sac-like structure is thylakoid. And when I am stacking multiple thylakoids here, I get a granum here. This single stack is known as granum. Multiple stacks are known as grana. And this singular structure, if I talk about, is thylakoid. This singular structure is known as thylakoid. The cavity inside the thylakoid, this cavity is known as lumen. This cavity is known as what? It is known as lumen. And it is inside this cavity that my pigment chlorophyll is stored. Where? Chlorophyll is stored here. Now there are multiple such grana here. So there are certain sheet-like structures. If I am highlighting them, certain sheet-like structures which are connecting the thylakoids of different grana. Can you see where I have highlighted it in red? These are certain sheet-like structures which are connecting the thylakoids of different grana. It's known as stroma lamellae. What is stroma now? The fluid which is present, this fluid which is present inside the chloroplast, it is stroma, and lamellae are the sheet-like structures. The sheet-like structures present in the stroma which are connecting different thylakoids, it's known as stroma lamellae. It's important for me to understand all these parts because chlorophyll, just like the cell, it also shows division of labor. What does it show? Division of labor. So in the process of photosynthesis, we will see that there are two types of processes which are occurring. One process in the photosynthesis is known as light reaction. The first step in the process of photosynthesis is light reaction, while the second step is dark reaction. So all of you, I'll make you write that, I'll show that to you. But the light reaction, it is occurring in the membrane of this thylakoid, and the dark reaction is occurring in stroma. So just like a cell also, the chloroplast, the organelle, also divides its work, it divides its labor when it comes to the process of photosynthesis. And now I am moving to the next part of pigments involved in photosynthesis. A plant has got various pigments. Whether I talk about carrot has got a different color. Turnip has got a different color, right? Anthocyanin gives turnip its purplish color or onion its color. Carotene is the one giving carrot its specific orange color. So there are different leaves, different colors of fruits, different color of flowers. All of it is a result of pigment. And the pigments are involved in the process of photosynthesis largely. It is mostly chlorophylls which are involved in photosynthesis, but some accessory pigments are also there. Now, if we have to separate the pigments which are present in a leaf or in a plant part, we can definitely undergo a technique which is known as chromatography. In chromatography, we basically split the colors. On this paper, you can see different pigments getting separated. There is carotenes present here, xanthophylls showing a little yellowish color present here, chlorophyll A, chlorophyll B, whatever pigments are separated here by the process of paper chromatography. Chromatographic separation of the leaf pigments shows color, that what my leaf looks like, it is not because of one single pigment, but it is a combination of multiple pigments and multiple colors put together. It depends that what color dominates, and hence the leaf will reflect that color. Everyone, this is important, the colors of the pigments. Chlorophyll A shows bright or blue-green color in the chromatogram. Bright blue or green color is for chlorophyll A. Chlorophyll B shows a yellowish green color. So A is the major photosynthetic pigment. Why is it the major photosynthetic pigment? I'll also tell you that. But it is the one which is bright blue-green, B is yellow-green. Xanthophylls are yellow. Carotenoids are yellow to yellow-orange. And this exact information is really, really, really important. Can come in the form of question such that it would confuse you. So make sure that you do it nicely. Now I'm talking, suppose for example, by chlorophyll A. Now my students usually get confused when I talk a lot about its chemical structure, because NCERT doesn't show it, but it kind of has a flag-like structure which has got a porphyrin ring. This ring that is formed here, this is known as porphyrin ring, and there is a phytol tail. You can just call it as a hydrocarbon tail also. But just remember, there's a ring-like structure present here, in the center of which you're looking at a magnesium ion. In the center, there's a magnesium ion which is present. This is the chlorophyll-like structure, a ring and a hydrocarbon tail, that is it. Now, when I talk about chlorophyll A, it is found in the photosynthetic plants, and it is one of the most important photosynthetic pigment. It is the primary photosynthetic pigment which is helping in trapping the light energy and gradually making the chemical energy, which is glucose. It's the formula which is given here. We don't need to do that. We already know that it is blue-green in color, and it is the one which is absorbing a maximum of the blue and the red light. And out of the blue and red, it is more absorbing the red wavelength of light. While when I talk about chlorophyll B, it is absorbing a little bit on the blue side of the wavelength. So this was my chlorophyll. Now everyone, one thing that I want to tell you, that when we are splitting the light, we are calling it as spectrum, right? Now there are two types of spectra which are discussed in your NCERT. One is known as action spectra, the other is known as absorption spectra. You should understand the difference in between both of them. First is what you should understand is absorption spectra. So absorption spectra is nothing else. Absorption spectra is nothing else, but it is a graph. It is a graph that we make. It is a graph between what and what, all of you? It is a graph between what and what? It is a graph between, I would say, wavelength of light absorbed. That what is the wavelength of light absorbed and absorbance. So if I draw a graph like this, can you see here on the y-axis, it is showing absorbance of light. On the x-axis, everyone, there is wavelength. This is what which goes for here also. Or if I write it separately for you, but this is showing me different wavelengths of light. This axis is showing you wavelength. So when I'm showing wavelength versus absorbance, this is absorption spectra. And when I am talking about action spectra, all of you, when I say action, action is kind of the result to it. Action is kind of the result to it. So when a pigment is absorbing certain wavelength of light, it will lead to photosynthesis. And in the action spectra, what do we see? It is nothing else but a graph between the wavelength and the rate of photosynthesis. So whenever you look at a graph which is showing you nothing else but rate of photosynthesis here and wavelength here, this is an action spectra. So yes, this is an action spectra. This is an absorption spectra. So to understand what all is put here over this, what is this, you have to first understand what is an action and what is an absorption spectra. And I hope you got it now. Right, everyone? I hope this is clear to you now. So yes, kids, with this, we have seen the action and the absorption spectra, that what is the basic meaning to these words. And now when I'm moving to the next slide, it is actually showing you the figures, the diagrams which are given in your NCERT. Let's try to understand it. And it would be very easy for us because now we know what is action and absorption spectra. Now, if you will see this graph number A, it is showing me the absorption spectra. When I say absorption spectra on the y-axis, absorbance on the x-axis, there is wavelength which is marked. And if you see clearly, this blue colored peaks, it corresponds to the pigment chlorophyll A. That chlorophyll A is actually doing the absorbance where? At this specific wavelength and per se this specific wavelength. While if I talk about carotenoids, these are the wavelength peaks of carotenoid pigment. This green color is the chlorophyll B pigment's peak of absorption. So this absorption spectra is basically showing me that these respective pigments are absorbing the specific wavelength. Okay, action, no, absorption spectra telling the absorbance. Now if I move to this graph number B, on the y-axis it is showing rate of photosynthesis. Rate of photosynthesis means this is the action spectra which is showing me the result of the absorption. And where is it peaking up? It is peaking up in this region per se, and it is peaking up in this region, right? I got two peaks here. Now I have to see that the rate of the photosynthesis, it's maximum at two locations. Now these two positions, it corresponds or it overlaps with which of the following pigments which are mentioned here. If you will just compare it with the blue peak, the green peak, the yellow peak, you will realize that it is kind of superimposing with the peak of chlorophyll A pigment, which is blue in color. And that is what this graph shows. That they're showing the action spectra here and they're showing the absorbance of chlorophyll A, and these two peaks are overlapping. What does it infer? What does it say? This both rate of absorption, rate of photosynthesis and absorption shows me what, bachon? This shows that, this shows what? This shows that chlorophyll A is the primary photosynthetic pigment. What is chlorophyll A, everyone? Chlorophyll A is the primary photosynthetic pigment. It is stating me this. So I hope all these are clear to all of you. Moving ahead to photosystem, that what actually is a photosystem? It is basically a complex of various pigments. Various pigments means it will contain chlorophylls, it will contain carotenoids, xanthophyll, right? Everything, and it is a complex of it. Now it looks somewhat like this, or if I would draw it for you, there is a center which I call as reaction center. There is a center which I call as what? There is a center, suppose this is my reaction center. What is this? This is my reaction center. Around the reaction center, there are different pigment molecules. You can assume this green one to be chlorophyll B. You can assume it to be carotenoids. You can assume the other one to be xanthophylls. So different pigment molecules are present which are surrounding the reaction center. Now what are they doing? What are they helping with? This complex that you see here, this is a photosystem. A photosystem is made up of this, a reaction center. This reaction center, all my dear kids, it is made up of chlorophyll A. Reaction center is made up of chlorophyll A. I'll say that what is it? This is nothing else but reaction center. It is made up of chlorophyll A, and all of these are antenna molecules or light harvesting pigments. What is this? I call them as antenna molecules or light harvesting pigments. What will they do? If the sun is here, the sun's rays will come here, and the pigments will absorb it. The pigment will absorb the rays of the sun and they'll pass on all their energy to the chlorophyll A molecule. They'll transfer all of their energy to chlorophyll A molecule. Suppose this is my sun. The rays of the sun are falling on different pigment molecules as well as on the reaction center. Now my reaction center will be given all the energy that all my antenna molecules have trapped. So this thing that you see here is known as photosystem. If I tell you photosystem is made up of reaction center. What I was writing, yes, it is made up of reaction center and it is made up of light harvesting complex. When I talk about this light harvesting complex, it has accessory pigments. It has accessory pigments and it also has some light harvesting proteins. So this is a complete photosystem. This is a complete photosystem. Reaction center formed by chlorophyll A molecule, light harvesting complex, which has the accessory or the antenna pigment molecules, as well as some light harvesting proteins. All the antenna molecules, they would help in gathering different wavelengths of light and finally giving it to chlorophyll A, and they also prevent the photooxidation of chlorophyll A. Sometimes there's a lot of direct sunlight falling on chlorophyll A molecule that could degrade its structures. So these molecules are like sunscreening the reaction center. Like we apply sunscreen to protect us from the rays of the sun. In the similar way, these antenna molecules, they're also helping the chlorophyll A to protect from the extra sun's radiation. So this was my photosystem, all of you. This also shows you the same thing. This is the reaction center. Antenna molecules, sun's energy falling on it. Now what will the energy of the sun do? Now this chlorophyll A molecule has got a lot of energy. Now using that energy, one of the electrons of chlorophyll A molecule, whose electron? One of the electron of chlorophyll A's molecule gets excited and goes to a higher oxidation state, right? There's a primary electron acceptor present here which is accepting that electron. How did this electron move from this energy state to this energy state? It moved from this energy state to this energy state by a lot of energy of what? By the lot of energy given by the sun. Now my chlorophyll A molecule will be deficient of an electron, yes or no? Why? Because it is its electron which moved above. So to compensate the loss of electron which occurred here, it is showing water splitting. When water will be split, it would release 2 electrons, 2 H positive and half oxygen. So it is this 2 electron which is fueling chlorophyll A. So this process continues. This process of electron exciting continues because we are fulfilling the electron lost by splitting of water. Now where is this water coming from? This is the water that we are giving the plant in the morning, that okay, we have to take care of plants, we have to nurture plants. So yes, you do give water to the plant. Now that water is actually splitting up. It is photolysis of water, I'll talk about it again, which is helping the chlorophyll A get the electron that it has lost during this process. Okay, everyone else than this, I have written photosystem types. So there are 2 types of photosystem. I call one of it as photosystem 1 and the other as photosystem 2. There are 2 photosystems, all of you. How many photosystems are there? There are 2 photosystems. One is known as photosystem 1. The other is known as what? Photosystem 2. Photosystem 1 and photosystem 2. All of you, it is my photosystem 1 where the reaction center is chlorophyll A. We know that chlorophyll A is the reaction center in both of these locations. But now there is a specific wavelength of light they would be absorbing. In PS1, we call this reaction center as P700 because it absorbs the wavelength of what range? 700 nanometers of light, while PS2 is known as P680. Why? Because it absorbs the wavelength in the range of 680 nanometer. So this is PS1, this is PS2. They've written here P680 and denoted as PS2. So these are the 2 photosystems we know. Now we already know that what is a photosystem. It consists of antenna molecules, it consists of reaction center, and it is showing me the 2 photosystems I have talked about. Each and everything is the same, except Photosystem 1 is P700, reaction center P700. Here it is P680. Photosystem 2, P680. These are the antenna molecules, primary acceptor of electron, because electron would be excited by the sunlight which is absorbed by all the pigment molecules, and that's how both my photosystems look like. With this, everyone, we come to the next topic, which is electron transport. We're talking about the cyclic and the non-cyclic electron transport chain, and it is a really important step, really important topic. Now, before we move ahead and see cyclic and non-cyclic electron transport chain, that how is it making sense, what do we do in it, we need to understand the basic story behind photosynthesis. What we need to understand? We need to understand the basic story, the basic timeline, or I would call it as the basic steps of photosynthesis. So my process, which is photosynthesis, is divided into two steps. Number one is known as the light reaction, after which the dark reaction occurs. First is what? Light reaction, then it is dark reaction. Now everyone, I know that in photosynthesis, what is my main agenda? My agenda is to make glucose. So this is step number one, this is step number two. If glucose would have been formed in the light reaction, then there would not have been any need of dark reaction. So that's why I learn it in my head. I make it a scene that yes, because in photosynthesis glucose is being made, so glucose synthesis must have occurred in the dark reaction, right? Because that is what is going to complete the whole process. So glucose would be formed here, where? In the dark reaction. Now everyone, what happens in the light reaction? In light reaction, the light energy is trapped. The light energy is trapped, and it is trapped in the form of some superpowers, some energy rich molecules. What are those two energy rich molecules? What are those two superpowers I talk about? All of you, when I talk about light reaction, we synthesize our two superpowers, which is ATP and NADPH. So ATP and NADPH are synthesized here in the light reaction. The light energy is trapped here to form these. And in the dark reaction, what do? We use this ATP and NADPH to actually synthesize glucose, right? Everyone, it is this light reaction. See, they've shown here light reaction. What we are doing in the light reaction? They're trapping the light energy. Can you see? The light energy is getting trapped. And what are you forming out of it? ATP and NADPH. It goes into the Calvin cycle. Everyone, Calvin cycle is nothing else but the dark reaction. When I say that they're talking about Calvin cycle, it is the dark reaction, everyone. What is happening in Calvin cycle? My ATP and NADPH are used in the Calvin cycle. CO2 is fixed, and what do we get out of it? We get glucose. So basically, we're now going to start off with the first step, which is light reaction. In light reaction, I'm going to synthesize ATP and NADPH. How? By a process I call as electron transport chain, that you just read in the topic, and the electron transport chain is of two types. It could be cyclic electron transport chain or non-cyclic electron transport chain. And I'm going to start off with, first of all, non-cyclic electron transport chain. I'll tell you each and everything about it. I'm going to draw it for you first of all on this plain page, and then I'll show you the diagram which is given in the NCERT. It would hardly take 5 minutes, and it's really easy and interesting at the same time. But if I talk about the non-cyclic electron transport chain, let me put some pointers here on the side to explain you. But it is this non-cyclic electron transport chain. We also call it as Hill reaction, because the name of the scientist who gave it, his name had Hill word in it. His name is Hill, so it is known as Hill reaction. But we will also be calling this, the one that we would be drawing, as Z scheme. What we would be calling it as? We would also be calling it as Z scheme, because of the characteristic Z shape. And since it is non-cyclic, all of you, since it is non-cyclic, so I also want to tell you that it is non-cyclic, all of you. It is occurring where? It is occurring in the membrane of the thylakoid. I told you light reaction is occurring in the thylakoid membrane. So the position So the position that where is it occurring? It is occurring in the thylakoid membrane. Okay, so these are the three initial pointers. Now talking about non-cyclic electron transport chain, it includes both of my photosystems, bacho. It includes both of my photosystems. Suppose I am making it here for you. Here I am making photosystem 2 first of all. Here I am making photosystem 2 first of all. How will I be making photosystem 2? I will be making a reaction center. Photosystem 2 means it is going to be P680. Yes or no? It is going to be P680. And suppose somewhere here, it's a little bigger than this. Give me a moment. I want to draw it a little bigger itself. Yes, everyone. Suppose this is P680 and corresponding to it, here I am drawing P700. P700 is what? P700 is my photosystem 1. So this is the sequence of photosystems aligned here. First of all, photosystem 2, then photosystem 1. What I would be drawing then? I would be drawing my favorite character of the story here, the sun, who is fueling each and everything. I would say that the energy of the sun or the rays of the sun will fall on this also. The energy of the sun would fall on this photosystem also. Other than this, suppose with this pink color, I am drawing the antenna pigment molecules here all together with the same color, though they are a combination of different pigments. Right? Photosystem 2 first, then photosystem 1. Now the rays of sun would also be falling on the antenna molecules. The antenna molecules will be transferring all of their energy to the chlorophyll A, which is reaction center. Now talking about this step here, what would happen here? Listen to me very closely. Now, because of a lot of energy reaching here in the reaction center, which is formed by chlorophyll A molecule, I told you there's an electron of chlorophyll A molecule which is getting excited to a higher energy state. So suppose what is sitting here is an electron acceptor at a higher energy state. Now whenever my electron will be coming to a lower state, where is my electron coming, all of you? Now as and when my electron comes on a lower energy state, this is electron bacho, coming on a lower energy state here. Electron coming on a lower energy state. Can I say that since they are coming on a lower energy state, they would be releasing some energy? So the energy that they release, all of you, the energy that they release is stored in the form of ATP. Now, where is this energy coming from? When the electrons which are on a higher energy state, they're coming on a lower energy state, they'll be releasing some energy, and it is trapped in the form of what? It is trapped in the form of ATP. Okay, it is trapped in the form of ATP. Everyone, now the sun rays are also falling here. There's a lot of energy present in this reaction center also. So the electron will again be excited and it reaches another acceptor here. And it is somewhere here, all of you, it is somewhere here that the electron is finally accepted by a NADP positive molecule to form NADPH. The final electron acceptor is NADP molecule, which forms NADPH. So this is what? This is my non-cyclic electron transport chain. Everyone, highlighting it a little bit. What do you see? Where do you see the Z shape? This arrow, these arrows where the electrons are coming on lower energy state, and then the electrons again getting excited. Do you see this shape? This is the Z shape. That's why we call it as the Z scheme. Now, the last point here is, if my chlorophyll A molecule, which is here, it will always gives its electrons and sends its electron above, then it would become deficient in electron. Now, who is fulfilling that electron deficiency which is occurring here? Who is fulfilling the electron deficiency? The water that we are giving to the plant in the morning, 2H positive plus 2 electron plus oxygen, right? So it is these electrons which are being supplied here. So this process occurs here along with photosystem 2, and I am calling this process as what? This process occurs in the presence of magnesium ions, Mn2 positive, and also chloride ions. And this process is known as photolysis of water. Photolysis of water means water is lysed, water is broken down in the presence of what? Water is broken down in the presence of sunlight, and oxygen is also released here. What is also released here? Oxygen is also released here. So if I just count down the major pointers here, in this reaction I am using both photosystem 1 and photosystem 2. As the name says, it is a non-cyclic electron transport. What is occurring here? Water is splitting here. Number 2, oxygen is released here. And the last pointer, what is my output out of these? ATP and NADPH. ATP and NADPH is the output that I'm getting out of this. This is the non-cyclic chain, and once you do the non-cyclic chain, the cyclic is a child's play. But before that, I would want to show how it is given in your NCERT, exactly what we have made. I could have shown you this diagram, but I actually wanted you to understand what is happening in a stepwise format. Everyone, like this, they have shown photosystem 2, photosystem 1, light is falling on it, electron is getting on a higher state, electron is coming downwards to a lower oxidation state. There is electron transport system running here, during which ATP is formed. Finally, NADP positive is forming NADPH to compensate the electron which left chlorophyll A here. Water is splitting, and this is non-cyclic electron transport chain, during which we synthesized ATP also, NADPH also, and it occurred where? It occurred in the thylakoid membrane. Now this is the cyclic electron transport chain, and it is the easiest of the deal. Everyone, it is the easiest of the deal. Let me tell it to you. Suppose the only photosystem which is involved here is photosystem 1. The only photosystem which is involved here is photosystem 1. So it is P700. 1 was what? P700. And it also has the antenna molecules around. P700 or photosystem 1 has antenna molecules around. My sun is suppose shining bright here. The sun's rays falls on the antenna molecules on this. The antenna molecules gives all of its energy to the reaction center. It is my reaction center whose electron is getting excited and is being accepted also. There's an electron acceptor here. After this, what happens? My electrons come down to a lower oxidation state gradually. My electrons are coming down on a lower oxidation state gradually. Can I say that when they're coming on a lower energy state, they would release some energy? There was electron transport chain which was running throughout. It releases some energy coming from higher to lower oxidation state, and that led to the formation of ATP or adenosine triphosphate. And my electron returned back to what? My chlorophyll A molecule again. So you can see that it is the cyclic way. So I do not need splitting of water. No oxygen will be evolved here. Only photosystem 1 is involved. only ATP is formed, NADPH is not formed. I told you that once you have done the non-cyclic thing, the cyclic thing would be done in like a minute literally. So this is the cyclic electron transport chain. Do I have some place to help you out with it? Yes, everyone give me a single minute, because when I'm talking about the non-cyclic one, I'd want to mention a little bit of pointers somewhere here or maybe here. Okay, everyone, when I'm talking about the cyclic one, I would first of all say that what is involved here? Only PS1 is involved. What is synthesized here, all of you? ATP only. Only ATP is formed here. Did water splitting occur here? No water splitting. No oxygen release occurred here. And the last pointer, I know it is cyclic itself, but so the next pointer is that it occurred in stroma lamellae. What is the placement? What is the position? What is the localization of this happening? It is nothing else but stroma lamellae. So these are certain pointers which are important with respect to the cyclic electron transport chain. Only PS1, ATP is only synthesized here. No oxygen is released here. I'll change the color of these accessory molecules to make it a little more appealing for all of us, so that you can see the added pointers a little bit more clearly. Bachcho, I hope now you would be able to draw it when your teachers will tell you to even draw this in your board exams. So this is cyclic electron transport chain, this is non-cyclic electron transport chain, and this is what I meant by light reaction. In light reaction, what is occurring, everyone? ATP is synthesized using the light energy. ATP is synthesized using the light energy. What am I calling it as? I am calling it as phosphorylation, because this ATP is formed in the presence of light. I am calling it as photophosphorylation. I am calling it as what? Photophosphorylation. I am talking about it. And with that, I am introducing you to the last topic of this session that I call as chemiosmotic hypothesis. Now, what is this chemiosmotic hypothesis? How is it working? Why are we studying it? Because I told you that there's light reaction, there's dark reaction. Then what is this chemiosmotic hypothesis in between? Everyone, to tell you what is chemiosmotic hypothesis, we have 2 times seen that electron was transporting here. There is an electron transport chain running here, which led to ATP formation. I told you that, okay, electron is moving downhill. Electron is coming from a higher to lower energy state, and that led to the formation of ATP. But suppose any of you asked, ma'am, how? If any one of you asked, ma'am, how? Then how does this electron transport chain formed ATP? This concept, this specific concept, we are going to understand in what topic? Chemiosmotic hypothesis. Chemiosmotic hypothesis is going to tell me that how is ATP synthesized using the electron transport chain. I'll write it for you, but I hope that so far whatever I have told you is clear. And now I am moving to this last topic that we're going to do now. Okay, everyone, so let's wrap up this session by doing this topic, chemiosmotic hypothesis. I already told you that when I'm talking about chemiosmotic hypothesis, first of all, let us understand that who gave this hypothesis? The name of the scientist who gave it, his name is Peter Mitchell. Oh my God, what happened? Everyone give me a second. Yes, I think now it's fine. But so the name of the scientist is Peter Mitchell, who gave this hypothesis called chemiosmotic hypothesis. This hypothesis is basically explaining ATP synthesis. What is it explaining, all of you? ATP synthesis during Electron transport chain. Yes. So this hypothesis is going to explain me how is ATP actually synthesized during electron transport chain. I already know that during this process, the rays of the sun are directly falling on the photosystem. Hence, we are introducing the word here, which is photophosphorylation. What is it? Photophosphorylation. When I talk about, oh, I've written it quite in the slanting way. Let me write it properly. Everyone, when I say photophosphorylation, photophosphorylation is nothing else but the formation of ATP in the presence of sunlight. When I say the word photo means light. Phosphorylation means I am talking about formation of ATP, which we are going to learn in this process, chemiosmotic hypothesis, that how is it occurring. Now, this is a really, really complex topic when I go to your NCERT. So we'll be doing it in the form of layers, so it's understood to you. Hardly 7 to 10 minutes and we're done with this session. Requirements of chemiosmotic hypothesis, what do we need? We do need a membrane. Membrane, which membrane? Thylakoids membrane. We need thylakoids membrane where the electron transport chain is running. We need a proton pump. What is a proton pump? Which is basically pumping protons, all of you, which is pumping protons through it across the membrane. We need a proton gradient. Proton gradient means a difference of proton, that at one end there would be more H positive, at the other there would be less H positive. That is what I call as a proton gradient. And ATPase, it's basically an enzyme which helps in ATP synthesis. So here in this membrane, you see proton gradient, that there are more protons at one side. That's the proton difference. And this structure, this enzyme is known as ATPase. It is known as, everyone, what? This is known as ATPase. Now, I have drawn this for you so that I could really fastly, properly explain you what it is. Really fastly explain you what it is. But before this, yes, we've seen the introduction. But before moving to the final structure, I want all of you to understand a sequence of electron carriers. Or in the other way, I would say I want you to remember the sequence of some electron carriers. So just go with me, all of you. Just go with me. I want you to just remember the sequence that I am putting here. First of all, just have the non-cyclic electron transport chain in your head that we've covered. We've talked about photosystem 2. We started off with what, everyone? Initially, we started off with photosystem 2. Then what will come into picture after this? Plastoquinone. I'll call it as PQ. After plastoquinone, it is cytochrome B6F. Then it is plastocyanin. After plastocyanin, it is photosystem 1. Then we have ferredoxin. Then we have FNR. So before moving to the main topic, I want all of you to remember the sequence, that yes, electrons are moving in this flow. Why, everyone? I am saying that electron is moving from photosystem to plastoquinone. Why? Because plastoquinone is more hungry for electrons with respect to this. Electron is moving from plastoquinone to cytochrome B6F. Why? Because cytochrome B6F is more hungry for electron. So the movement of electron always occurs where there is more redox potential. More redox potential, basically in layman language, we would say it as the hunger for electron. So let's remember this: photosystem 2 to plastoquinone, to cytochrome B6F, to plastocyanin, to photosystem 1 to ferredoxin, to FNR. Okay. Now, once we have learned this, we've seen the requirements. This is the structure we have to understand and we would be done with it. Everyone, now what is this that I've drawn here, out of where it came up? This is nothing else but the non-cyclic electron transport chain that we've already done, number one. This structure that you see here, this is not a chloroplast, this is a single thylakoid. This is a single thylakoid. If you all remember that if this is a chloroplast, there were thylakoids in it. This is chloroplast, which is a double membraned organelle, right? The chloroplast have thylakoids in it. So it is this single thylakoid that I have drawn here. Am I making sense that it is the single thylakoid that I've drawn here? This is the thylakoid membrane. Outside the thylakoid, this fluid, it would be called as stroma. The cavity inside the thylakoid, it is known as lumen. This is the cavity in which the chlorophyll is also stored inside. Now everyone, I've made the non-cyclic electron transport chain. We've already learned the components. Photosystem 2, plastoquinone, cytochrome B6F, plastocyanin, photosystem 1, pyridoxine, FNR. Okay, we know up till this much. Now what is happening here? This is sun. Everyone, what is this sun? This is exactly 50% non-cyclic electron transport chain only. I said that the sun rays or the light is falling here. Yes, everyone, the light is falling here, and this light is also falling on this photosystem also. Now, since light is falling here, the electron out of chlorophyll A will move to what? It will move to the first electron carrier, which is plastoquinone, which will get reduced, and the cycle will go on. It will take the electron, get reduced, right? Take the electron, get reduced, again release the electron, and give it to cytochrome B6F. Cytochrome B6F will give the electron to plastocyanin. Plastocyanin will give the electron to photosystem 1. Photosystem 1 will give it to pyridoxine. Pyridoxine will give it to FNR, and FNR will finally give the electron to NADP positive. It will give the electron to NADP positive, which will pick up hydrogen H positive from the stroma, will take the electron and will get converted into NADPH positive. Am I making sense? So this is what? This is exactly the non-cyclic electron transport chain that we have seen. Photosystem 2 to plastoquinone to cytochrome B6F to cyanin to photosystem 1, pyridoxine, FNR, NADP positive. We can see already the formation of NADPH, which occurred during the stroma side of the membrane. Now everyone, the only purpose we studied this was why and how is ATP formed here. Why and how is ATP formed here? Now everyone, again, this water is splitting here. Why? Because it is this water splitting which will provide the deficient electrons to the chlorophyll A present here. So this is exactly this is exactly non-cyclic electron transport chain. Now this is something different I'm looking here. This complex of CF0 and CF1, it is known as nothing else, but this is ATPase enzyme. This is ATPase enzyme, which is going to help me in the formation of ATP. This CF0, I will write here, this CF0 acts as a tunnel, which will allow the movement of H positive, and it is the CF1 which will help to synthesize ATP. Now, where will H positive be accumulated, all of you? My H positive will be accumulated inside the lumen. How? I will tell you. Why? I will tell you. But understand how ATP is formed first of all. I will give you the reasons of accumulation of H positive inside the lumen. Now, the electrochemical gradient is such that there is more H positive here in the lumen and less H positive here in the stroma. Now consider this thylakoid as a balloon which is full of H positives now. Now, when it is too full, when it comes to a saturated state, when it is a balloon also, if you put in more air, what it would do? It would burst with the release of energy, right? A balloon would burst with the release of energy. So everyone, here also, as this thylakoid is full of H positive, there will be a stage where the H positives which are present here, through this tunnel which is CF0, they would come out to the stroma side. They would come where, everyone? To the stroma side. They would come where, everyone? They would come to the stroma side. And what would happen as a result of it? Because of them breaking this apart, because of the balloon getting busted, ATP will be released here. What will be released here, all of you? ATP will be released here. So if you understand it clearly, what is leading to the formation of ATP? The accumulation of H positive inside the thylakoid lumen. These H positive, once they go from this thylakoid inside to stroma, it would lead to an outburst of energy. That outburst of energy is stored in the form of this chemical molecule, which is ATP, adenosine triphosphate. Now, the only thing which we are left to understand is to link both of these, that how is this H positive accumulated here? What are the three reasons precisely that our NCERT has given us for H positive increasing in the lumen or H positive decreasing in the stroma? Two reasons are already in front of you. Two reasons out of it are already in front of you. Right? Am I making sense? I hope this is making sense to all of you. Now, two reasons. What are those two reasons? Number one is here. Number one is here. Can you see that water is getting splitted here, which is leading to the release of two electrons? Two electrons along with which two protons are also released. Bacho, I'll be taking this light green color per se, and I am making a big dot here. This is the very first reason of H positive increasing in the lumen. Very first reason of H positive increasing in the lumen. The second reason of H positive decreasing in the stroma is this step, all of you. It is this step because NADP positive is absorbing the H positive to make NADPH plus. Am I making sense? H positive increasing in the lumen, H positive decreasing, getting consumed in the stroma. These two reasons led to H positive accumulation here. The third reason. But do you remember when photosystem 2 took in the sunlight, it gave the electron to an electron acceptor. Now they're saying that the electron acceptor, which is present on the outer side of this membrane somewhere here, that is not actually an electron acceptor, but a hydrogen one. It's a hydrogen carrier. So basically, what is the result of it? What is the result of it? Every time the electron is passing here, H positive from the stroma is pumped into the lumen. So basically, because it was not an electron carrier but a hydrogen carrier, so as electron was moving here through this, H positive was pumped from the stroma to the thylakoid lumen. This is my third reason. This is my very third reason. Pumping, what you can call this third reason as? Pumping of H positive from stroma to the lumen during the electron transport. This is the third reason, all of you, that led to this H positive gradient. It is this H positive gradient that H positive will move through the tunnel. The tunnel is CF0, will move to CF1. Moving of H positive here will bring some conformational change in CF1. So CF1 will show a conformational change like this, due to which there would be synthesis of ATP seen here. Right? So I hope this is making sense to you. One of the most complex topics that we have in this chapter was this one, showing you this same thing here. photosystem 2, plastoquinone, cytochrome B6F, plastocyanin, photosystem 1, pyridoxine, FNR, finally NADPH getting formed, as a result of which in the thylakoid lumen, do you see H positive coming from the stroma side to the lumen side? Do you see splitting of water? This H positive increased in the thylakoid lumen goes out through the ATP synthase molecule, led to the formation of ATP here. So this is the exact same thing that I have shown you here. But if this is making sense to you, you can answer each and every question. You can answer each and every question. Bachcho, I hope that all of us understood that when I call that what are the 3 reasons for proton gradient formation, that when I say that why was my proton gradient formed, number 1, I will say that water splitting everyone led to the release of H positive. Number 2, what would I say? NADPH formation, where NADPH formation in stroma. On the stroma side, NADPH is formed. That also led to the proton gradient. Number 3, H positive movement from stroma to lumen. From stroma to lumen, as electron was transported. As electron was transported, H positive was also transported. So these are the 3 reasons, all of you. These are the 3 reasons which led to the proton gradient. Which led to what, everyone? Which led to the proton gradient. Now, when I have the proton gradient, protons will move through the CF0, which is a tunnel. Their movement will bring conformational change of what? It will bring a conformational change of CF1 particle, which has ATPase activity, due to which what is formed? ATP is formed, all my dear kids. And this is what Peter Michel said, that how does my electron transport ultimately led to ATP formation is what we have done so far. I hope it is making sense. This is the simplest of the diagram which is given in your NCERT, but usually the examiner asks questions a little bit more in detail. That's why I've put the previous diagram here. Photosystem 2, cytochrome, photosystem 1, F0, F1 particle, H positive accumulated, ATP getting formed. So everyone, this is what? This is the chemiosmotic hypothesis, right? I hope this is making sense to all of you. And with all of this, my dear kids, yes, we've got a good swag here. We're ending the first session, and I hope you liked the session. This session was intricately important with all of its details. And with this, I'm going to see you in the next session. But remember to subscribe to the channel, because this is going to fetch you the selection you are looking for. So be patient, be a sponge. Always be ready to accept information, because when you are going to college, when you're going into MBBS, you would have to understand the names of each and every bone, each and every cartilage present here, different muscles, and there would be enormous information coming your way. So if you are not absorptive right now, because when I'm talking about photosynthesis, it comes with a lot of technical names, NADP, NADPH, what is this, where oxidation, where reduction. So be inquisitive about it. If you are not inquisitive about it, it would just be a load you are carrying. You won't be carrying it gracefully. So carry the information in your head very gracefully, because only that is going to convert into grades and get you a selection. So with this, I sign off here, and I am going to see you in the very next session, where we would be finishing up the complete chapter. So stay tuned, and do tell me how did you like the session, And did you understand chemiosmotic hypothesis? I will be interacting with you a lot in the next session, and I'm looking forward to the comment box here because I really am intended to doing a little bit of chit chat with you, getting into doing more questions once the chapter is ending. So do subscribe to the channel and press the bell icon. And signing off for today. Thank you so much, everyone.